One man killed 1 million people in 8 years. Not a plague, not a famine. One general, one army, and Rome gave him a triumph for it. The Romans didn't hide their brutality, they celebrated it. Carved it into marble, paraded survivors in chains, and elected the men responsible to the highest offices. These weren't monsters in the shadows. They were heroes. And that's what makes them terrifying. These are the 7 most brutal generals Rome ever produced, ranked by body count, yes, but by the cold, calculated ruthlessness that defined each one. Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great. He earned that cognomen before he was 30, not for wisdom, not for statesmanship, for killing. In 67 BC, Rome handed him the Mediterranean pirate problem, a crisis that had festered for decades. Pompey solved it in 3 months. 270 ships, an iron timetable, pirate strongholds crushed one by one with the methodical precision of a man who treated warfare like a logistics problem. Then came the East, Pontus, Armenia, Syria, Jerusalem. He walked into the Holy of Holies, a room no non-priest had ever entered, out of pure Roman curiosity, looked around, and left without touching anything. That almost makes it worse. Pompey wasn't cruel for pleasure. He was indifferent. People, cities, kingdoms, variables in an equation. He added more territory to Rome than any general before him, millions absorbed into the Roman machine. He ranks 7th, not because he was least brutal, but because his brutality was the most bureaucratic. Clean, efficient, utterly without malice. Somehow, that's the coldest thing on this list. Before Caesar, before Augustus, the Romans considered Scipio Africanus their greatest military mind. He could have been a clean legend, no asterisks. Instead, he gave us Carthago Nova. In 209 BC, Scipio stormed the main Carthaginian supply base in Spain. The city fell fast. Then he unleashed his soldiers on the population. Ancient sources record thousands slaughtered, men, women, animals, in the systematic Roman practice of terror designed to break every city watching from a distance. The message wasn't just "we won," it was "look what happens." He repeated the lesson at Ilipa, at Zama, where he broke Hannibal in a single afternoon of tactical genius. After Zama, Carthage surrendered, and Scipio actually argued against destroying it outright. He had a sense of proportion his successors lacked entirely, but proportion is not mercy. Scipio understood that controlled brutality was a tool. He used it precisely, deliberately, and without apology. He ranks 6th because he was brilliant enough to know exactly what he was doing. And did it anyway. Gaius Marius saved Rome. Then he tore it apart. 7 times consul, a record so absurd it broke the constitution. The first time, he saved Rome from the Cimbrian Teutones, Germanic tribes so numerous ancient sources describe figures in the hundreds of thousands. Marius didn't just defeat them. At Vercelli in 101 BC, he killed or captured over 100,000 people in a single engagement. But his real legacy was what he did to the army. The Marian reforms opened the legions to the landless poor, men with nothing, and gave them loyalty to their general, not to Rome. Generals paid soldiers, generals rewarded them with land. The legions belonged to their commanders, personally and absolutely. Marius built the weapon that would destroy the Republic. Then, in 87 BC, in his final grab for that 7th consulship, he marched on Rome alongside Cinna and unleashed days of systematic murder on his political enemies. Senators dragged from their homes, heads displayed in the Forum. He died of natural causes 17 days into that 7th term, which is almost a mercy because Marius had already burned down everything that came before. History remembers Mark Antony as Cleopatra's lover, a tragic romantic undone by passion. Forget that. That's Octavian's propaganda, and it worked beautifully. The real Antony was one of the most savage battlefield commanders Rome ever produced. At Philippi in 42 BC, it was Antony, not Octavian, who was ill and hiding, who crushed Brutus and Cassius and ended the last serious republican resistance. The Republic died. And before Philippi, there were the proscriptions. After Caesar's assassination, Antony joined Octavian and Lepidus and published lists, names of men who were now legal targets. Any citizen could kill them and collect the reward. 300 senators and 2,000 equestrians were proscribed. Cicero was on that list. Antony put him there personally, settling an old grudge with a bureaucratic stroke of a pen. Cicero's head and hands were cut off and displayed on the rostra, where he had given his greatest speeches. Antony's wife Fulvia reportedly drove a hairpin through Cicero's severed tongue, almost certainly embellished. But the fact that Romans found it believable tells you everything. He ranks fourth because his brutality was personal, calculated. Petty in the most dangerous way a powerful man can be petty. Lucius Cornelius Sulla did something in 88 BC that Romans considered literally unthinkable. He marched his legions on Rome itself. The Pomerium, the sacred city boundary, was a place soldiers were forbidden. Sulla crossed it anyway. His command against Mithridates had been stripped by political rivals. His response was to put 6 legions at the city gates and walk in. He passed emergency legislation at sword point, then left for the east, apparently satisfied he'd made his point. He had not made his point. He came back. In 83 BC, Sulla returned and fought his way into Rome in a civil war that killed tens of thousands. Then came the proscriptions, the first formal murder lists in Roman history, names posted publicly. Anyone on the list could be killed by anyone. Property confiscated, families barred from public life. Approximately 1,500 nobles and 9,000 equestrians were executed, some added simply because someone wanted their property. Then he declared himself dictator, held the position for 2 years and resigned, voluntarily, walked away from absolute power and retired to his country estate. He didn't need power for its own sake. He just needed everyone to know he could take it. 6,000 crosses, 120 miles along the Appian Way, the main road into Rome, so every traveler, every merchant, every senator would see them, smell them, for weeks. This was Crassus's message after crushing the Spartacus revolt in 71 BC. He didn't just defeat Spartacus, he exterminated the movement. 6,000 surviving slaves crucified alive, with explicit orders the bodies were not to be removed. He wanted them to rot in place. Crassus was the wealthiest man in Rome, possibly in all of Roman history. He owned the city's fire brigades. His men arrived at burning buildings and negotiated a purchase price before putting out the fire. If the owner wouldn't sell, they let it burn. He bankrolled Caesar, bankrolled Pompey, kept the Republic turning through economic dominance alone. But wealth wasn't enough. He wanted a military legacy. In 53 BC, he marched east against Parthia, against everyone's advice, and walked into catastrophe at Carthago. The Parthians lured his army into open desert and shredded them with horse archers. Crassus was captured and killed. According to one account, molten gold was poured down his throat. The richest man in Rome, drowned in what he loved most. 6,000 is not a number, it's a statement. 1 million dead, 1 million enslaved. 8 years, 1 man. Caesar's Gallic wars killed approximately 1 million people and enslaved another million, out of a total Gallic population of 6 to 8 million. That is not a war. That is a demographic catastrophe. Caesar wrote about it himself. His Commentari de Bello Gallico is one of history's most brilliant pieces of military propaganda, composed in the third person, which tells you everything about the man. He described mass slaughter with the detached language of an administrator filing reports. At Alesia in 52 BC, he trapped Vercingetorix behind siege lines while holding off a massive relief army. When the relief failed, Vercingetorix surrendered, and Caesar paraded him in chains for 6 years, then had him strangled in the Tullianum prison. The Eburones were virtually exterminated as a people. A war that began as an illegal land grab ended with an entire civilization broken. At home, Rome celebrated. 50 days of public thanksgiving, the longest in Roman history. Caesar ranks first not because he was the most sadistic. Sulla's proscriptions were more personal. Crassus's crosses more theatrical. Caesar ranks first because of scale, because of efficiency, because he did it with a smile and a literary style that made it sound almost reasonable. 1,000,000 dead. And history called him great. Every general on this list was celebrated in his own time. Elected, funded, cheered. The brutality wasn't a flaw in the Roman system, it was the Roman system. Rewarded, ritualized, carved into marble for eternity. The question isn't why Rome produced men like these. The question is what it says about a civilization that needed them. If you want more deep dives into the people who actually ran the ancient world, the real version, not the sanitized one, subscribe. New video every week. And if Caesar's Gallic Wars made your jaw drop, wait until you see what Augustus did to consolidate the empire.